All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Rick, and I'm going to begin the presentation for Team 5. Our group has decided to go with the ethical quandary of the gender pay gap. We cover what the definition of the gender pay gap inequality is, as well as the causes, the facts, the figures, and some legislation that has been proposed to combat the issue. The definition of the gender pay gap, as defined by the European Commission, is the relative difference in average gross hourly earnings of women compared to men within the economy as a whole. Now we're going to move into some facts and figures. As you can see, research shows that women on average earn just 77% of what men do for completing the exact same job. This equates to 77 cents for every $1 that a man earns. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the wage gap is amplified as the workforce ages. Young women ages 16 to 19 years old earn about 93% of what the men do in the same age category, but statistics show that women over the age of 65 earn even less than that, about 17% less in actuality, for a total of 76 cents for every dollar. The gender wage gap is even further increased for women of color. Hispanic and Latino women will only earn on average 54 cents to every dollar that a white male earns. Moving on, we can see further widening of the wage gap is the reverse when it comes to advanced education. So this happens after women receive an advanced degree. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average weekly earnings of a woman with an advanced degree over the age of 25 will earn only 74% of what a man does for the same demographics. It is 77% for those with less than a high school diploma over the age of 25. This can affect a woman's ability to repay student loans, as she is earning less than 3/4 of her male counterparts. Now, Kyle's going to talk a little bit about causes.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different causes that happen because of this, and studies have tried to explain away some of these causes, and sometimes they've done a good job, and sometimes it's been really poor to understand. A couple of the main ones that stick out are the basic stereotypes that men and women have. And this it translates both to the hiring manager of someone that's going to hire that person, and also to the young girls as they're growing up and going to school and trying to choose which profession they want to go into. It influences what kind of jobs that they try to apply for. There's also other things like socialization that also play a key role. But there hasn't been one study that really nails down exactly what causes this. On the next slide here, there's a graph that shows the different female pay by industry. And that just maps out the different sectors where there's either a really high pay gap or it's closer to equal. And that just mostly depends on the industry, and also, again, that stereotype of what's traditionally women's roles and what's traditionally men's roles. But we can see that there is quite a spectrum on some industries, and that's one of the positions that we took in this paper, was to understand that and how to prevent that or to change it moving forward.
Perfect. So next we're going to be talking a little bit about the legislation that is associated here with the gender wage gap. So we can see that the Equal Pay Act was introduced in 1963, but this wasn't entirely 100% effective the entire time. So in 1994, the Fair Pay Act came, and the main thing with the Fair Pay Act was this was striving to promote pay transparency and to address unequal wages. As of 2017, the Paycheck Fairness Act by Lilly Ledbetter and the Pay Equity for All had not been passed either. Most recently, a step towards equality was taken back by President Trump when he rescinded the equal pay protections and stopped the implementation of data collection, which would have increased wage transparency. And so moving on, a little bit more details about the Equal Pay Act, which again started in 19 1996, and this was declared to raise awareness about the gender pay gap. It symbolizes how far into the current year a woman would need to work in order to be paid the same amount as a man in the previous year. It is traditionally held in the first weeks of April, meaning women would need to work an additional 3 months to be paid the same amount as a man in the previous year. 12 months of working for a man compared to 15 months for a woman. There are changes continually happening in order to close the wage gap, but if the changes continue at the same pace, women will not be paid equally and the same as men until 2059. The change rate is worse for women of color. Black women need to wait until 2,124, and the Hispanic and Latino women need to wait to 2,233. At this point, Kyle will now present on how the gender pay gap hurts productivity.
Yeah, so this is one interesting study that we had found. The key message here at the bottom is that there's about a 10% reduction in income equality, and this can boost, by having this, it actually changes in boosts labor production by up to 3%. Now, please notice labor is spelled with a U. It is a European study. I can spell. But there's a couple things that are interesting about this study that we came up with is that there are some women that settle for employment in kind of a lower paying field. They just kind of settle and don't use their talents and abilities to really do their best and to help a company to achieve its maximum profit. So that's going to hurt productivity. Some women also choose to enter male-dominated careers and they don't get paid as much, and that's been a real disappointment as we've gone through this paper. Third, women are penalized by the marketplace when they take time to have children and raise a family. The next slide kind of talks more about this, women are penalized because they step away from the workplace and kind of skills and the industry may change a little bit. Women sometimes also need to have more flexible hours, and employers don't see that as a benefit, and so they're penalized in that way. So there are some long-term consequences, unfortunately, that do happen when women try and balance that home and that home life and that work life, and it really does hurt productivity. And we'd encourage and we'd love to see more employers trying to find that balance for women to help them use their talents and abilities to better the company and to make it more productive. That would be a great change for all companies because women add so much to the profitability of those companies.
All right, we're going to transition a little bit into the military combat, military and the GS pay scales, right? So if you see from this slide, the military does not have a separate pay chart for enlisted men, enlisted women, commissioned men, commissioned women, or enlisted officers or enlisted women. As we can see from this chart, it simply just has the rank and the longevity or the tenure that the person has. Recently, all combat roles have been opened up to women. I know a lot of people would view the military and its male-dominated presence as being the last place to look for gender equality, but actually it seems from the evidence that it's on the forefront. The Marines recently graduated their first ever infantry Army officer, and the Army Rangers 2 years ago gave the first Army tabs to females. While a large portion of the service is male, it does seem as though there is no gender pay gap in the military. There's no separate pay scales from one to the other. And the next slide shows the general schedule or the scale for civilian employees in government. This also does not have a separate tab for men and women. So the civilian workforce is paid on a scale similar to the military. And each position is assigned their salary based upon their position. No credence is given to what their gender is, simply what the position they fill and how long they've been there. Now Tyler's going to take over and talk a little bit about some affirmative defenses that companies may have.
Perfect. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the affirmative defenses. I know that's maybe a little bit of the opposite side of the token that we're going to, but I feel it's important that we can kind of present on both sides here. So affirmative defenses are basically when is pay differential permitted. So as we can see, the most important thing to know is pay differential should not be permitted when it's gender specific. Some things where it is permitted is when it's quality or quantity related, seniority, merit. But it's important that these should only be exercised when the employer can legally and ethically approve that they apply to each unique situation. Coming down, we see that it's also more than just compensation. Several of the research articles noted that the gender wage gap has also begun to take a broader measure than just compensation and wages when we factor in things like access to health insurance or retirement or paid leave. So as we've talked about throughout this presentation, the key focus is for us to minimize pay discrepancy and to promote wage transparency. Just in the closing marks here of our presentation, I wanted to take us back to week 3 in class where we learned about some of the legal requirements of ethical decisions. If we go back and review those slides, we remember these are 3 of the bullet points: that everyone should always obey the law. The law is to represent the minimal moral standards of that society, and legal standards should recognize the nature and understand the worth of human beings. So that's just wanted to bring that up in closing here, and then now Rick will kind of tie everything together.
All right, in conclusion, this has been a presentation for our ethics class, right? And our conclusion is, based on the evidence, there definitely is a pay gap that exists. But drumming down into the model that we studied in class, the following ethical duties were not considered. First, utilitarian benefits, distributive justice, and contributive liberty. With the utilitarian benefits, we see that the evidence suggests that firms, economic and economies at large and are negatively impacted as a result of the practice of gender inequality. Distributive justice, while not suggesting women are in any way the least among us, given the viewpoint taken of women as a result of the evidence presented, the lower pay does harm those perceived to be the least among us, at least when it comes to pay. And contributive liberty, the pay gap does limit the opportunities for women to advance in careers and even, I can't say that word, are you serious? Women from pursuing educational opportunities.